Welcome to another Coffee with Developers. I'm here with Daniel Siegl from Syntevo. If you don't know what Syntevo is, we're in the same boat. So how about give me an introduction what you guys are doing?
Syntevo is a company that currently has its 20th anniversary season, and we always did professional version control clients. And currently, our most prominent client is SmartGit, which just recently was released in the new 25.1 version with some AI capabilities, and that's somehow how we got to the topic, basically.
Exactly, because today we want to talk about how AI is affecting version controlling and how version controlling is affecting AI. I also saw that you had an SVN client at one time, and that gave me like shivers back in my past. I think I
Yeah,
used about 20 different version control systems in my career, but Git seems to be the most obvious one.
Yeah, I work a lot in regulated industries, and you still see less prominent ones like IBM RTC or so. But I would say out of these very regulated out industries, it's primarily Git now, with Subversion being really on the way out.
Mercurial, ClearCase, Microsoft Star Team. Oh God, all CVS, all the things I had to use in the
Yes,
past. Like, yeah, at
yes.
Yahoo we had CVS, and the founder of the company was the CVS admin. So basically, this your CEO, when you did something wrong in version control, you got an email from your CEO. I fixed it for you, and you're like, okay, that's not scary at all.
Yeah, and and as I said, in the automotive or aerospace industry, you will still find other tools, but in outside world, it's primarily Git nowadays, and with SmartGit, we have a very compelling product to make it easier to manage all your work in the version control universe.
It feels for a techie, it feels weird to have a client to actually use version controlling. But I found, for example, with Git on Windows to use GitHub Desktop, for example, installs Git in the background without you having to do anything. That was the big step for me because explaining to people how to get Git started at the beginning when it was really tough. And then you
Uh,
have to go to set your path thing and you go to the terminal and you do that and you're like people just like, no idea.
and
What are the main features that actually are missing in a normal workflow that your client actually gives people? What are the things that are people most excited
uh,
about?
You mentioned very important points, the ease of deployment. Also in an enterprise scope, when I want to have all my apples to be green and not some red and not some yellow apples, they all should be green. You have the peace of mind that you can distribute the client with the approved Git version and so on across all developer seats. Or if you think about Mac, have you ever gone through the hell of Homebrew? SmartGit comes with SmartGit comes with Git binaries out of the box, and you just install it on the Mac, and you're good to go. And it's a lot of convenience, but it's also oversight. If you have many branches, maybe a more complex branching strategy, this is one asset for clients. And also, if you bring in new people, that you have a really simplified approach to branching and how they can rebase. You hear so many people that say, I'm all fine with command line. But then if you ask them, when have you rebased the last time?
Hmm.
They go silent quick. And so it's all about making capability available for everybody on the team, not just the nerds.
And that's the idea. I love that Git and GitHub made that a thing. Like that basically out of a sudden people didn't create files called version one, version two, final one, use this one. Instead, they actually used version controlling and got into that. But then you got designers that put like 4 GB PSD files into GitHub and wondered why it was slow.
LFS is another good example where Git client really can help you, because if you have assets, binary assets, the Git client can help you to track them correctly as LFS and make it usable, which is hard if you just use an IDE integration.
Hmm. We found a few months ago. I had somebody on Coffee with Developers, a colleague of mine from Microsoft when I worked there, and they found out that like Git has this problem that it only recognized the last 12 characters of a file name, and it saw it as a not identical file if it changed like that. So they had like changelog.md in lots and lots and lots and lots of subfolders. So they had like a few terabytes of repository, and then they
Okay.
realized by fixing that in Git itself, it went down to like 200 megabyte.
Yeah, there is always surprises, you know. After all, it's also 20 years old, and it's work in progress and always evolving. I currently have a very funny issue where LFS cache grows just by calling git status, you know, something
Okay.
you would never find, but it happens. Yeah, I can prove it. And so there's always things behind the scenes, and this is also kind of the professional tools. They help you select the proper Git version and guide you through the process in a in an easy way.
I would also assume that like with like npm attacks and these kind of things, and also Git vulnerabilities, that going back to an older version is much easier in an environment like yours than doing it by hand, because you can see the different versions across different branches and
Yes.
servers, I guess.
Exactly, exactly. And you can connect multiple hosting things. And now we are already at AI. It's really interesting when you talk about vulnerabilities. One use case where you can use AI perfectly in a Git context, if you have a if you have a query in natural language, like I want to know which 5 developers worked on code lines with printf in them,
Hmm.
not something I can type in Git Bash out of the top of the head, but with ChatGPT or other models, you get the Git query in seconds from natural language. Very
Well, you
effective.
hope Well, you hope you get the right one with ChatGPT.
Yes.
You might actually get something with malware injected without knowing it. That's where GitHub Copilot came in as well. And I mean,
uh,
what I liked about it as well is that it actually, I mean, to me, version controlling is not about like necessarily the files, but also about the comment, and also about the pull requests and how you describe those things. I
and
mean, a query telling me which files changed is something that I can see easily in Git. But like what I love, for example, is that Copilot at one time gave me a walkthrough that basically said, like, here's the 5 changes that were, and if you want to test it in the app, you have to do that thing to the app to see the changes. And I
yes,
found these are the clever bits that I want to see more of, because typing those walkthroughs by hand was never fun before committing the 30 byte change you did to the code.
absolutely not. And also, I think we have to see when we use the AI tools, generally, strong engineering process practice is even more important. And tools like GitHub or GitLab help us to live a sane engineering process with reviewing and so on. You know, it's not just uh, create change, run them, but also a process like somebody actually has to review stuff.
Now, the big thing, of course, is agents doing the work for you and also doing all the branching and
Yeah.
things for you. How much of a mess is that at the moment? Is this something we should be worried about, or is this something that is actually as useful as people say it is?
I think it's a bit a matter of accountability. Uh, in my world, coming more from a regulated background, as I said before, I need people to be somehow accountable for change. So, yes, the agent can prepare a branch, but then a human has to bring it into his feature branch, review it like it was his code, and stand behind it, because otherwise it becomes a bit wild, wild west. One thing that we've seen when you talk about branches and um, and and agents is that we see in our customer base a trend to use local agents and have them work in work trees, in Git work trees, something invented 10 years ago. And when they are finished in the Git work tree, you review the changes, bring them into a normal feature branch, and send them off into the process. So it's
Mhm.
basically like pair programming with a junior programmer that is working on a separate thread in a separate Git work tree, and when you are happy, you bring it across, but you sign off basically on it.
Yeah,
It's less,
it's just like
hmm?
outsourcing to an agent to a degree, like to a junior
Yeah,
developer agent that you don't pay much for. And
yeah. And I don't think this way how you can do it in GitHub, that you really assign an issue on the platform uh, to Copilot and then get a ready-made pull request, is not good for anything safety related or so on, you know. There might be scenarios where it works, but if you need to trust the code in safety and security terms, I would want humans to really sign off on it, you know, to have somebody who is responsible after all.
yeah, I mean, it's a matter of like how fast you want to release and how secure you want to be. I mean, it drives me crazy when people go, oh, like, yeah, well, it's vibe coded, so if there's a vulnerability, I change it tomorrow anyways. But yeah, I mean, vulnerabilities tend to linger hidden in the code, no
Yeah.
matter what you do. And I think
What
that's where the human eye is most of the time important. And I mean, given the automation that we have, we should have more time to get to hone those skills of reviewing rather than coding, right?
Yes, and I think automation is a very good point if you jump aboard and really want to work with agents productive. You need to up your automation game on top on version control, you know. You need to do the security checks. Sometimes the vibe coding tools inject old versions of libraries and stuff like that. You have to automate all of this. And very interesting, because you mentioned the junior programmer. Without an agent's MD, most of the tools really don't work well, you know. And it's just like in the old days when we didn't tell the junior developers everything about the project, we couldn't expect nice results. The more we tell the junior developer about the project and the task on hand, the better results we can expect from them.
Can you go a bit deeper on HSMD? What the format is like? What's supposed to be in there? What's best practice for an HSMD file?
I'm not a super professional. I can just tell what works for me. My agent's MD file explains the purpose of the project. My agent MD file explains how it's built, which build scripts I want to use. It explains what are my smoke test scripts. It explains some boundary conditions, technical decisions, just like a what we called in old school German language Projekthandbuch, you know, or,
Mm,
or, or design document, and there is some reasoning in it, and um, a big statement that it's not allowed to to modify CI/CD to get positive results without fixing the problem, you know, these kinds of things. And it really what was a it was one of these things that really made the experience a lot better, and the code changes became less verbose. The agent started to touch less files for changes and so on. So it was really good for me. I don't know if
yeah.
it was the only thing I changed, but it was really, really interesting to see that this had such a huge effect. And coming back to the old days, yes, if we told the junior developers always things like we now have in Agents MD, life would have been better also in the past.
Yeah, especially don't touch the CI/CD if you don't know what you're doing. That's always a good thing to have. There's also an LLMs.txt which people use to actually stop bots from scraping. But I guess in your environments that you work with, that's not a thing, anyways, is it? That things are
No,
public.
no. We have customers with private repos most of the time, you know. The open source is a market, but open source developers can have SmartGit free of charge. The same is for academia. So our real accounts from software development or automotive development or aerospace development, it's all closed sourced anyway. What we see is that they have that they rent private instances of LLMs or have specifically trained LLMs for their data.
Hmm. The work trees is one of the things, as you said, it's really, really old, but people don't use it much. It's really, it's a really fascinating tool to actually make sure that your main repo is completely out of bounds, and at the same time you can let the thing do a lot of stuff that makes sense. How do you ensure good reviewing practices, like when it comes to like agentic workflows and stuff? Like, do you
Yeah.
find that developers get into it easily, or is it just people that already were senior developers that reviewed junior people's code all the time anyway?
Yeah. So I think reviewing is all about patience, you know, and and also that you understand the intent of a change. If you don't understand the intent of a change, the reviewing is going to be cumbersome no matter what. And especially with the newer agent mode development styles, I have seen the changes get less verbose. They don't change everything just for a bug fix, but they are more chirurgic. I don't know the real English word, but they
Surgical.
do. So they do a more surgical, yes, sorry, they do a more surgical coding, and then it's easier because I think you can only start doing AI vibe coding for production if you are ready to sit in on all those reviews.
Mhm. And I mean, I've seen people that use several agents that actually review each other. That sounds to me like it's going sooner or later in one of those happy paths that you talked about, that they're trying to make up rules just to follow the rules rather than just like writing
Yeah.
code that works.
And it happened to me as well. If you don't pay attention, you end up with a big mess of code, and you basically are frustrated and are not willing to review it, and then you give up and do something else, start over, and then efficiency is gone.
Mhm. There is an art to a size of a pull request, isn't there? Like, do you see that like agentic code or generated code ends up in larger pull requests with far too many files to review, or is it something that you can tell it to do as well? And if so, do you limit it?
I would have said 3 months ago, yes, it gets chaos. And now I have a setup with a local cloud agent that behaves rather well. And
Hmm.
does and typically when I look in my Git client, it doesn't touch files I wouldn't have expected it to touch. So
Okay.
I think there was improvement there, but the real challenge is how will we be able to teach junior developers to become great reviewers when they never learned the craft by hand.
Yeah, when you never make the mistake, you never feel the pain. You never feel the empathy for the person that makes that
Yeah.
mistake as well. And on the other hand, if you have LLM generated code, it just repeats mistakes that it found on Stack Overflow without
Yes.
thinking about it, right?
Yes, it can be really tricky. And I made in a previous presentation, I made the analogy. It's like getting stuck with a Unimog on snow chains. You need
Hmm.
heavy equipment to recover. If you get stuck with a normal passenger car, three bystanders probably can push you out. But if you
Hmm.
are stuck with one of these massive vibe coding experiments and it gone wild and changed all the files and so on, it can be really cumbersome to recover.
I mean, I always get a bit tainted when it comes to all these messages about vibe coding. When companies that whose job it is to do AI coding, they say like, "Oh, we do 90%, 10, 100% of our code." I don't see that many people use it in earnest yet, especially in the enterprise world. I think it's a lot of people are using it experimentally right now, but the main meat code that happens every day is still done by hand or like aided by development during development rather than by written by an agent itself, right?
And I think this starts one point earlier. Programmers might get the job done. Software engineers or software developers know they need some requirements, they need test data to get stuff done. And if you have these boundary conditions, basically sane engineering in place, you can also have more junior developers. And it doesn't matter if it's agents or people. If you have your infrastructure, your documentation, your requirements, your issues all well formulated with backed up with test data, you will have greater results, no matter if it's AI or people.
Hmm. Yeah, it reminds me of I mean, my saying was always like a junior developer would take a look at something and say like, I can't believe it the first time. It worked the first time. A senior developer says like, I don't believe it worked the first time.
Yeah,
There must
yeah,
be something, there must be a double error that makes it look like a positive.
yeah,
We have seen too much, I guess.
yeah. The gray hair tells a story.
Cool. I mean, commit messages are another thing that I had to teach a lot of developers. Much like,
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I wasted far too much time in my career on is trying to get code standards in place. That's something that you can automate much easier nowadays with the development environments that we have. But commit messages that make sense and only tell the real story and give me a walkthrough, for example, to validate the changes. Is this something that you see can be generated with AI already, or is it still something where you need to have an in-depth knowledge of the project?
We have seen, it depends a bit on the project. I have seen projects where it works rather well, that you get the commit message. Does the commit message answer the why, as a real commit message should do in many organizations? I'm not always sure.
Mhm.
Very often it's a summary of the obvious, the Git diff. I worked with a company called Raycon that is specialist in creating large language models for automotive companies. And there we did something beyond. What we did there is, if I check in code and I mark it with the issue ID, the LLM will validate if my code changes relate to the issue description and if this can make sense or not. And I get the result good, maybe, or for sure not.
Mhm.
For example, if it says, if the issue is you need to set a minimum speed of 2 kilometers an hour, and I check in code where a min speed parameter is set to 25, I will get the red flag from the combination of the commit message and the issues stored. And this is really powerful, but it's very bespoke and for one scenario, for one environment, but it can really be great.
Mhm. Because people, I mean, like we've been advocated that a lot. Like, oh yeah, it can actually go through the commit message and give you the gist of the commit message rather than the other one. And I always think like, well, nobody tells you stories in commit messages. I mean, we're lazy as developers. We normally only write what's absolutely necessary. And getting a gist of a commit message from an LLM seems to me like a lot of important information would fall through the cracks, right?
Yeah, yes, and I think it's even more important, maybe also for future proofing our commit messages, that we reference issue IDs in the commit messages.
Hmm.
Because when we then can have better access to the issues or requirements, and we have the traceability in the commit message, we will be able to do more clever things going forward.
Which brings me to triaging of commit messages. I mean, when I worked in large corporations, we got like 6,000 a day, and we had to write scripts to basically say, like, okay, that's obviously the same won't fix issue we told people 50 times.
Yeah,
Do you think that that's where agents and like LLMs can help us a lot as
I,
well?
I think you can use an LLM perfectly to judge if the text explains a possible why or not. And if the issue is linked, as in my previous example, I think it can be really good. Or via the feature branch, maybe also you can get good judgment if this can make sense or not.
Hmm. Now, you have one point here in our notes, accountability question mark. What did you mean by that? Like
A-
who's
a-
responsible for what?
Accountability, accountability. It's I work a lot with safety critical customers building safety critical software, and accountability is always for me who is responsible if something goes bad. And I think this is where we exactly need to know which human was the mastermind of the agent that did the code change, and which human reviewed the code change and signed off with his name that this makes sense and is not a liability, in whatever sense.
Hmm.
And The danger is really that humans like to be lazy or distracted or whatnot, and that if all the coding happens automatically, that it will be hard to get the patience required for reviewing all the changes.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, if, I mean, that's what attackers do. They actually, in open source projects, they actually create, change lots and lots of files, do a commit message with like one fix, and hope that you're too bored to look through all of them.
Yes.
So and that way put like malware in one of the files 60 levels deep, but the one that they actually helped you with is the one that you normally focus on. Do you think that's something where a client can help you with as well, much more than just going through it in the command line?
Yeah, maybe because it's easier to see the full context of the project tree in one glance and where you changed things, you know. I also think in the pull request UIs, it's sometimes not so easy to have the oversight in which directories files were touched and not. And this is much easier on the client side to
Hmm.
understand the project structure with the change and to see if something is fishy, you know. If I ask the agent for a style sheet change and I see my GitHub Actions directory has been touched, something must be fishy.
Mhm. That's true, yeah. I mean, the thing that interests me as well is like that when I talk to an AI or I chat with an AI, I don't talk to my computers because I'm old. I There's always like a sycophantic way. Like they always try to be nice and try to always give you a positive result, even if they don't know anything. They basically start hallucinating bits and tell you like, "Oh, I'm really excited that this is happening," and these kind of things. I've seen this with code as well, that basically that error handling was overwritten, or like instead of a break, it got a continue, and that made people's apps completely crash. So do you see that there is a positivity bias in generated code rather than in human generated code?
I have seen them trying to bypass my CI/CD. I have seen, with clever tricks, changing the validation step in the CI/CD after the smoke test.
Oh wow.
Cheeky,
Yeah.
cheeky, and like a naughty junior developer.
So you can demote your agent and they basically you
Yeah, yeah, I fire you. No, and so I think we really have to be very patient, and I think especially as a bit more experienced blokes, we have to take all the time to explain to younger developers that they need to be prepared to sit in for these reviews and understand the changes that are happening. Or if they can't understand it, they need to have the test data and the tests to make a box safety net, around it. Just like refactoring, you can't refactor if you don't have test data and tests, and it's similar to some extent.
Which brings you to the other point. We talked about how AI affects version controlling, but how does version controlling affect AI? I think as soon as I started version control in earnest, I became a better developer because I had to think about more things. I just basically I had to think about a commit message. I had to think about taking notes, what the effects of my code were. And do you think that's something that version controlling can teach AI in the roundabout way as well?
I think a lot of the AI coding was taught on version controlled source code, but I'm not sure if they just look at the latest trunk or they really also learn on the evolution of how the code grew, how the code was improved in the evolution of an open source project. I don't have these details, but I think version control is perfect because if you if you if you would be able to train on how the project evolved, how CI/CD went, how tests evolved, you really can learn in a passive way how software engineering works. After all, you know. If you have full access on a repo, you have all the CI/CD history, all the change history, and all the time in your world. You can study how a project evolves, how it got better, how it became good, which problems arise, learn from the problems, how to mitigate those problems. I think yes, it's possible, Is it done right now? I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that assumes that people have put the proper commit messages in place, that pull requests were answered properly rather than just closed because it was
Yeah.
the end of the week, and these kind of things. Now,
I have
in
seen, because we are in these kind of topics, I have seen people training on requirements and how requirements changed
Mhm.
during projects. I
I
have
mean,
seen
there's a
that.
few AI first companies that basically would go completely back 20 years when it comes to software. They say, like, let the machine write all the code. You have to concentrate on the specs and write a good specification, and then let the machine pick whatever framework they want to actually to build the thing. But every time you change the spec, the whole code of the app changes,
Yeah.
which of course seems wasteful, but also I like it because it brings us back to like structuring our or thinking about our code. To me, the best code I've ever written was the one I didn't write because I in my during my specification phase I realized it's unnecessary.
Yes,
We often see
exactly.
that.
Yeah. And I had projects in my time where power consumption was a big topic because the battery needed to last one shift. And you looked at each line of code twice because each line of code potentially could cost battery life. And I think this is exactly this optimization idea that we had to learn in the past because we had little resources on edge cases, but now there is plenty of firepower in most devices, so it's a bit harder. But I think really we still need to focus to keep the code bases small in order not to die.
Well, I mean, it's also no matter what market you do. I mean, there's a whole world outside of Europe and America that actually has like really old mobile devices that still want to run apps.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of edge computing necessary there as well. Connectivity is not always an issue either. Like you sometimes on a train, for example, or on a plane,
yeah,
and then you realize just how broken and how brittle some of these things are.
yeah. It's and as I said, I did stuff in this arena, and if you do it with real hard engineering style, it's a lot of work, but the results are worth it. There is a return on invest if you build stuff properly.
Hmm. Well, especially also, I guess, with the performance of clients like yours, like I mean, the UI task of showing a change log or a change in across different branches is not an easy one to actually make that accessible and readable to everybody out there.
Yeah,
And there's lots of people that basically, yeah, just
and
fall into the same patterns. But there's a lot of place to innovate in this case as well.
and there is a really fun one. Even we in the group of software developers, not everybody understands the concept that for a merge, you see a merge with a common base, with a common ancestor, and only this helps us to see the conflicts. And if we do only a two-way diff, it always um, matters which one we open first if code was deleted or added. It's like if you drink from a glass of water and you drink from a glass and you pour something into the glass of water. If I look at both glasses, I cannot tell was the water added or drunk. Depends on the order. If I know the common ancestor, I could tell you filled water into the glass and I poured water out of the glass. But we always need to do three-way. And for example, our client also can show you the common base, and this really helps you to understand merge conflicts much better.
Yeah, I mean, the first time you look at a merge, like in Visual Studio Code, just the one that comes with it, it feels odd to actually, what do these buttons mean? Where do they go? Like, what do they do? Automatic merging, I never trusted still. I know it's good by now, but it still feels like a really weird thing. Do you think, do you see that like agents and automated systems are less timid about this? Is there a lot of rebasing happening rather than just trying to understand the merge conflict?
Yeah, I think rebasing and merge conflict is not. You still have to resolve merge conflicts when you rebase.
Yeah.
And I think if more code moves around because the computer moves the code more widely around than a human, the merging is much more here hideous because there is almost no semantic merge support in the industry at the moment. It's all basically text file based. And so it's really hard and harder. If you have a lot of movement in your code, the merging, it can be super, super painful.
So that's something we have to work on. Another thing that is an interesting one is explaining of changes. Like, I mean, when I do a commit change and I change, for example, a loop for a faster backwards loop or something,
Yeah.
I explain not only that the code changed, but that it was for performance reasons. I guess a machine doesn't know that, or where would it get that information from?
What we have not so bad results on is if you select multiple commits and you ask an LLM to explain what changes happen in this code, like a summary. That's working pretty well.
Okay. So
It,
going over several commits to get more
yeah,
history in that way.
yes, to get
Okay.
more context.
Okay.
And that's pretty okay. We even introduced a second old concept, not just work trees, but also Git nodes. So it could run in the background and populate local Git nodes with this information.
Okay.
So the information would not necessarily be shared, but Git nodes would be populated with the results from the LLM to be handy for you when you need it.
Excellent. Well, I mean, thank you so much. Just a lot of great information for people to take on. If you had advice for our listeners on something that you see people do with AI that they shouldn't be doing with AI, what is that?
Have describe what your system shall do, have some basic requirements, have some test data, and a lot of T for code reviews.
Hmm. I see a lot of people generating test data with LLMs, and that also seems to me like a dangerous thing to do because it's then too positive or too perfect data.
Yeah, I think the only test data, if you can, always have real world test data. Scramble it so it's not a privacy concern, but real combinations are unbeatable.
Yeah, humans are much more random than computers will ever be. So, and if
Yes,
you think you thought of all the edge cases, people will find a way to break your system. That's why human testing and user testing is also very important. And CI/CD
and
will not save you from everything.
especially if you get data from external data sources, it's even more important. If your app is kinda air-gapped, which means all data is inputted by your front end, it's more controllable. But if
Mhm.
you're bombarded by services like a tracking system for a parcel delivery company or whatnot, test data is the end game.
Cool. Well, I mean, thanks very much for this. Are we going to see you at our Congress in Berlin again this
Ye-
year?
Yes, this year I will be there. It's typically camping season, so I will fly in from Greece and go to the Congress and then fly back to Greece.
Okay, so you'll be the one with the tan then. Excellent. Well,
Yes.
thanks very much, Daniel. That was Daniel Siegl from Syntevo. So now we know what version controlling and AI and version controlling is about. And if you want to take a look at Syntevo stuff, I mean, you heard what it can do for you, might be something to take a peek at. Thanks very much, Daniel.
Bye bye.